It's not such an easy thing to do. In Europe, we have a situation where only the passengers can go to the gates. In the United States, as many of your viewers will be well aware, anybody meeting or greeting passengers can go through the security checkpoints and up to the gates, right. Meaning that there's an increased stress on the screeners.
Mr. Baum, maybe as a security expert, you can tell us exactly what pilots and flight attendants are instructed to do in case of an emergency, in case of a hijacking. What are their immediate instructions procedurally?
Well, the procedures, unlike mechanical failures, are basically to evaluate the type of hijacker. There are 4 different types of hijackers. There are criminals, there are terrorists, there are asylum seekers, and there are the insane or the mentally disturbed. This may be a combination of different types, but you have to react to the type of hijacker you have. Now, if, as we're led to believe, that these were very violent people who simply got out of their seats and started slashing flight attendants, then there is only so much that one can do, and one would have expected them to have just sort of gone back to their natural survival instincts and done whatever they could possibly do to survive. What I do not believe was the case.
Go ahead, sir. Excuse me. Go ahead.
Sorry, I certainly don't believe that it was the pilots themselves, even at knife point or gunpoint, that would have intentionally flown their aircraft into the Twin Towers or into the Pentagon.
You mentioned this briefly, you touched on this, but what will this mean for the future, security-wise, for commercial airlines? What can you see maybe immediately and through the first few months after this situation?
Well, certainly, I mean, there's already been an increase to threat code Delta in the United States, so security is basically at its highest level of alert once the planes go back in the skies. But that said, so there won't be things like curbside check-in. There will be restricting access to the gate areas. But I think that it's possibly taken an incident like this to prove that domestic security has to be treated the same way as international security on international flights. In other words, that there needs to be positive passenger bag match, that if you check a bag in for a flight, that you travel on that flight, that only passengers go to the gate areas, and certainly that the identification checks that are carried out by the check-in agents are going to be much more stringent. That said, I don't think we need to focus solely on screening of passengers. This was a very well orchestrated attack. This involved insiders, either in the airlines or in the airports. Certainly there are reports coming through this morning from Boston of people with contacts in the UAE with flight manuals were found in a car in Boston. These people knew what they were doing. They probably had very good contacts, and they didn't necessarily go through the passenger screening points.
All right, Philip Baum, thank you very much for joining us this morning.
Vince, as dawn begins to break over the East Coast, we take you now live for what for many of you could be the first look here on this day after of this devastating terrorist attack. The gap in the sky where you are looking is where the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center once stood. The New York skyline completely changed this morning as hundreds of firefighters are going through the rubble, trying to find if there are any survivors, trying to count the dead. We may not know for weeks how many people died in this attack on one of America's most significant financial power centers. And then on to Washington now, where we have this devastating scene of the Pentagon. There you see the collapsed area of the building where a passenger jet plowed through to the inner circle of the Pentagon. Once again, rescue operations there underway. As many as 800 or more Pentagon employees may have died in this attack. We are covering this throughout the day, but in the meantime, of course, Garrett Utley on the scene in New York, reviewing the damage, counting the losses. Garrett?
And Carol, also at this moment, we want to take a few moments and think about some of the heroes in today's tragedy or yesterday's tragedy. Of course, we don't know how many they were and what was happening in that airplane that crashed in Pennsylvania or in the Pentagon offices or even here in Lower Manhattan. But we do know this. We do know that 80 or more members of the New York City Police Department, men and women, are missing and feared lost. We know that 300 or perhaps even more members of the New York City Fire Department are missing or lost. Who were they? There were people doing their jobs. They were the ones this morning or yesterday morning who were racing into those twin towers to save people, going up the stairwells, while everybody else was racing out, and they raced into a trap. Here's a report from correspondent Deborah Farrick.
Many of the 300 firefighters missing and feared dead were believed to be inside the World Trade Center when it collapsed.
I can't find anybody from 5 rescues and 7 squads, and it's just it's a devastating thing. I don't know. Well, the fire department will recover, but I don't know how.
Arriving first on scene, they ran into the burning towers, carrying hoses and trying to get people to safety.
The horror of it all is all the first alarm, second alarm, third alarm, fifth alarm companies. They were all in there. And there's a lot of companies are wiped out from what I understand.
Fire engines were crushed, a strategic command center silenced, and several of the highest-ranking fire officials buried beneath tons of dust and steel.
I don't know what to say. We lost people that have given over 40 years.
Those who got out in time went back, injuries and all, to search for their friends. Others off duty grabbed their gear and raced to help dig out any possible survivors.
My brother works in the 91st floor. My brother, and he's unaccounted for at this time. So I'm just, doing a lot of praying.
Praying amidst an unnatural silence.
That's probably what amazed me the most. There was no people to be seen. Even the dogs couldn't find people.
At firehouses in Manhattan, there were flowers and mourning as everyone waited, holding out hope.
They should have been here already. The rig is not back. They're not back. They should have been back.
More than 30 police officers also died. Choking back tears, several firefighters summed up the catastrophe.
These are your buddies.
We lost a lot of friends today. A lot of friends.
A loss that will be shared by all New Yorkers. Deborah Farrick, CNN, New York.
And now we have some of the names of the 4 most high-ranking members of the New York City Fire Department. We'd like to mention them to you because we're getting so few names of victims in yesterday's disaster. Peter Gonchi, the Fire Department Chief. William Feehan, First Deputy Commissioner of the Fire Department. Ray Downey, Chief of Special Operations Command. And the Reverend Michael Judge, the New York Fire Department chaplain, missing and feared lost down in lower Manhattan today. What more can we say? What are New Yorkers waking up to? Well, now they're waking up to their morning newspapers, and now the New York Times is there. That says it all. U.S. attacked, the picture, and the stories of what happened. Today's headline, a headline that will not be forgotten. And back to you now, Carolyn Vince in Atlanta.
Certainly not the pictures that we're seeing and continue to see. Garrick, Deborah Farrick was reporting on what she called an unnatural silence in this city that never sleeps. What is the scene below you? What is the city like compared to how it would normally be at this very early morning hour?
Well, at this morning hour, it'd be pretty busy. 5:40, the workers will be pouring into town already, even before the sun has come up behind me here to the east. We have the streets, as you can see, which are empty. Some of them in lower Manhattan are sealed off, but the streets around us at 34th Street, traffic is being allowed, or some traffic at least. However, when you look over to the east of us, just 2 blocks away, there's an Empire State Building that's shrouded in darkness right now. But we're told that the streets around the Empire State Building have been sealed off, as has the headquarters of the United Nations on the East River, which was evacuated on Tuesday. The fact is that these are obviously 2 prime targets, 2 big high-rises, 2 of the biggest buildings in New York City. The fear is that there may be more terrorists out there somewhere, perhaps with a car bomb, and so security will continue to be totally tight during this day.
Sure. So what are you hearing in terms of how people are going to deal with their day? Are people going to try to get into the city, try to go to work, try to go about their business?
No, I don't think they are. They've been told, first of all, stay away from town if you don't have essential, absolutely critical business here. The bridges are closed to vehicular traffic, except for the George Washington Bridge, which may have just 1 lane under very strict control. So are the tunnels. Airports, of course, are closed. Much of the rail traffic has been shut down. schools, private, public, parochial schools will be closed. The stock exchanges will be closed. Times Square, Broadway will be closed. No traditional Wednesday matinee performances tomorrow. So life is going to be very, very slow, very, very difficult. And one added little indication of how life changes here and the concern over security, Carol, right below us down here at 33rd Street, about 15 stories below us here, is the Central Post Office of New York City. This is not only the Central Post Office in the city, it's zip code 10001. From pride taken by people in this 10001 zip code area. Well, the mail will go through, but on top of that post office is inscribed a famous saying about how no sleet or rain or storm or snow or whatever it's going to be will delay the letter carrier in carrying out his appointed rounds. Well, they'll be out tomorrow, but not totally, because tomorrow there will be no pickups from the Postal Service mailbox on the streets of New York City. The reason, obviously, the concern that some terrorist might put a bomb in a package and try to mail it off. They'll be closed and sealed.
Tomorrow already being today, as
Today.
we look at the scene now, and it looks like the sky is beginning to glow with possibility of the sun rising on this devastation. Garrick, also, I heard that some 3,000 National Guardsmen are going to be deployed throughout the city. Potentially, New Yorkers could be waking up to armed guards standing on their street corners.
Well, armed guards, the 3,000 mobilized by Governor Pataki have been moved in. They're there to supplement the police department, which is obviously stressed and overburdened. You can't maintain full force 24 hours a day. So, yes, we expect to see them there. There has been, this must be emphasized, no indication of security or increase in crime or looting or anything like this. For all the chaos we've seen today or yesterday and the human misery which continues today, the fact is that people have been amazingly orderly and disciplined in their behavior. And I think people in this city, in this metropolis, are taking a great deal of pride in that. So the National Guardsmen and women will be here, but there's no real security problem of that nature in the streets of New York today.
Yeah, and certainly we expect to see that typical New York can-do spirit. I don't know about you, but yesterday, as I was watching these pictures on the monitor, I was going through a mental Rolodex as to who I knew in New York, where they were working, did I know anybody in the World Trade Center? If people have those questions, what should they do? Yesterday, the telephone companies and the authorities were saying, please lay off the telephone lines. We need to keep those clear. What are the instructions for people if they're still trying to get information? What should they do?
Well, there are a number of lines that have been set up, 800 lines and other lines, not just by the government and officials here, but also by individual companies. There are scores of companies that have enormous businesses in the World Trade Center, the Twin Towers. Some of these financial companies had 10, 20, even 22 or 25 floors filled with employees. They have set up their own hotlines, their own emergency lines to allow families and friends to call them. And that's about the only way we're really going to know or get an early estimate as to how many casualties there have been in this tragedy. It'll take weeks to get the remains out, the bodies out, but if a census can be done, and the fact that de facto nose counting of who is still around, who can be reached, and who isn't, then perhaps by the end of today we'll get a rough idea of how many missing there are among the civilians, non-city employees working in the Twin Towers, and the full scope and human cost of this tragedy in New York City will begin to be known.
Boy, we're just seeing some closer up pictures of the devastation down there by the World Trade Center. Firefighters going through some of that wreckage. It does look like a war zone, and I'm wondering, are people facing any sorts of shortages there, any food shortages, fuel shortages?
Well, I ran out earlier last night to get a quick sandwich, walked into a diner here on 34th Street and said, "I will give me a cheeseburger." And he says, "No hamburgers." I said, "No hamburgers?" He says, no hamburgers delivered today. All deliveries have stopped." I said, "What do you have?" And he had some soup and a salad, and that was it. But that's a minor incident. There are no signs of serious shortages. However, if the tunnels and bridges are kept close to general delivery by trucks of foods, then in a day or two, you could have shortages. However, I would imagine, nobody said this officially, that by the end of business of this day, I think city officials will want to get traffic moving again, commerce moving again, and supplies coming into Manhattan, which after all is an island with only a few bridges across the East River and a couple of tunnels and a bridge across the Hudson here. This is an island, and the drawbridges have been drawn up.
Yeah, and I'm sure, as Mayor Giuliani and Governor Pataki were saying yesterday, they want calm on the streets, but I think they also want a show of faith in their administration, and a show of faith in the firefighters and the police officers who are responding, the National Guardsmen and women who are going to be responding and on the street corners. New Yorkers seem to have risen to the occasion. I haven't heard much about looting or crime going on.
No, we said that, just mentioned that the fact is that there is no reports of looting of any sort, and certainly the opportunities were there in Lower Manhattan. Businesses were being closed, the merchants were racing away to save themselves, owners of shops just as everybody else was.